All right, we will call this June 7th meeting of the Mackinac Straits Corridor Authority meeting to order. I'd like to welcome all of you. Thanks for joining us this morning. We will move through this agenda, and at the end of our agenda, we always have an opportunity for the public to make comments. We welcome folks to come up and make those comments. I believe they are signing up out front. If you wish to speak, we do have some submissions that were sent in. Those will be made public. We'll put those on the public comment on our website. And so with that, we will move forward with the agenda. Again, at the end, public comment. It'll be limited to 3 minutes. We're pretty flexible. Obviously, we want to hear your thoughts. But do understand that we want to allow whoever wants to make public comment, we want to give them all the opportunity to do so. So at some meetings we've had more than others, but we will be flexible with that as well. So with that, I would ask for approval of the agenda.
I would like to make one change.
Yes.
Ray was going to give us a report on the Peninsula Fiber Networks agreement, and I would wonder if we could put that
so
in
we'll
there.
add that under some old business.
Old business, right?
Yeah, yep.
And with that, move to approve the agenda.
Support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All
Chairman,
right.
to
Yes.
interrupt, I just wanted to bring up one point. Member Novak sent me an email. He is not able to attend today. He's in trial in California and on a big case, and indicated that he would not be able to make it to this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on then. Approval of the February 16th meeting minutes. We would need a motion.
Again, I have some suggestions here.
Yep.
On new business down there, number 2.
Yep.
Environmental impact, it says state, it should be statement.
Oh, yeah.
And I wasn't sure exactly what it meant on the next page. The first line says EIS process is noticed by the Corps. What is noticed by the Corps? I don't know exactly what that means.
So Tony, I'll answer that. So when an action is taken at the federal level, they have to publish that in the Federal Register, and that's what that means. It's
Okay.
an unusual use of notice as a verb, but
Yes.
that's what it means.
All right. Well, just as long as it makes sense to most of us. Okay.
Sure.
Then also the last sentence in that same section, I believe the lady from Enbridge did not say definitely there would not be a delay. She said that there's a good chance that there wouldn't be a delay, but she didn't promise there wouldn't be.
We can revise that. Thank you.
Okay. Down in the next paragraph, in the proceedings as intervener, it seems like there should just be a comma there. It's just a minor nit, but, and then.
What sentence is that?
Okay, that's the sentences. It looks like the third sentence in number 3. In the proceedings as intervener, the authority testimony came from Dr.
Yeah.
Blank. And then, let's see, I think that's all I had.
Okay.
And with those suggestions, I move that the minutes be approved.
Support. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, old business. Ray, you want to give us an update on the?
Yes. Yes, on old business, we have been working with Peninsula Fiber Networks attorney. We've had several drafts and revisions going back and forth. Enbridge's attorney is also taking a look at this, since ultimately Enbridge has the right to approve or change any portions of the final third-party utility agreement. We were hoping to get more accomplished before this meeting, but we have not. I believe that Peninsula Fiber Network is very interested in moving forward, and it's our hope and our goal to have something, some type of a draft agreement before this board for the October meeting.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Up next, under new business, updates to the project specifications. Mr. Mooney, or Dr. Mooney, welcome.
I assume you can hear me okay. Well, give me the thumbs up, somebody.
There we go. Now it's getting better.
Yeah, okay, great. Good morning. I'll provide an update on the jointly developed specifications, the edits brought forward by Arup, which is who is the designer of record. Just as background, the Enbridge team plus the Mackinac Straits Corridor Authority jointly
I'm
developed
sorry,
specs team.
Mike, hold on. Can somebody ask those
prepared these
people in the back?
specifications. These are project specifications requirements for the permanent works that ownership of which will be transferred to the authority upon completion, satisfactory completion and construction. That group that developed those on behalf of the authority includes myself, Matt Schnauwith, and then members from CDM Smith and Alfred Benesh and company, as well as Ryan Mitchell. Those were approved in February 2021, and then there were subsequently minor edits that were approved in October 2021. So Enbridge has requested additional revisions that is in your packet today, and I've provided a letter report summarizing my review as well as that of Matt Schnauwith. So I can walk through those with any level of detail you would like, but the big picture is that I find the revisions to be reasonable and acceptable. In fact, there are some editorial changes or editorial corrections, things like removing redundancies, clarifying statements. This is kind of a natural process when you continue on a project with specifications. I will note that in no instance does a revision decrease the standard of quality that's been established previously. And as I mentioned, editorial corrections aside, all the proposed revisions add value and or make more stringent the quality requirements of the project. There's only a half a dozen or so edits or revision requests to the specification sections. Would you like me to walk through those? I'll summarize them so that you have a sense for what they are.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
For example, the first one is a addition of a water stop, a SECA, which is the name of a company, water stop, retrofit water stop, number 609 was added, and that was added to the specifications to match with what's listed in the drawings. So that was just an oversight in the specification language. These water stops apply to the shaft or portal structures, and typically where you join cast in place concrete with already precast concrete elements. These are all buried structures. They're beneath the groundwater table, and so you want to make sure that you don't, at a construction joint like that, you don't have water seeping in, and so water stops are appropriately named. Moving on, there's precondition surveys done as part of all tunnel projects. Precondition surveys are served to document and provide kind of a baseline of existing condition or damage prior to shovels in the ground. And so the McGulpin Point Lighthouse is, of course, an important structure that resides near the South Shore Portal, and that would have been surveyed anyway as part of a precondition survey, but it's now just been added, listed as a specific structure for which a survey will be performed. Another edit or revision is to just correct, let me back up. The backfill grout specification, the outside of the concrete lining. That gap is filled with backfill grout, and that grout in the current spec allows for type 2 or type 3 cement to be used, and the request or the specification edit is simply to restrict only to type 2, so removing type 3 cement from the grout spec. This is done just because type 2 grout is better suited for sulfate resistance. So moving on then to the last spec section, which is the PCTL, or the precast concrete tunnel lining. Of course, that's the permanent structure, so that's of most interest to the authority. The inclusion of test method Astm C1012, that's an additional test requirement that's been included for the contractor to meet. C1012 assesses the sulfate resistance of concrete. In this case, this would be of the concrete mix to be used for those precast tunnel lining segments. There's a number of clauses just where that new test, the additional test requirement is to be incorporated. So that's why you see in Arab's table 3 or 4 items where the test is included, test reporting is required, etc. The next piece as far as a revision is additional language requiring instrumentation coordination. This is instrumentation required for a number of tests that are already in the current specification. These tests include concrete panels for fire testing, concrete blocks for joint testing, where you have the segments come together, you've got connections, bolted connections, and then you have the waterproofing nature via which is created via double gaskets, and then lining segments for thrust jack loading. So as the tunnel boring machine moves to the ground, it pushes off of the most recently installed segment, and so that thrust jack force must be there's required testing to make sure that those segments are performing, are designed to not to withstand those thrust jack loadings. So generally these tests are performed by specialty testing labs that subcontract with the general contractor, and so the additional language about instrumentation coordination requires that these test labs coordinate their efforts appropriately with Enbridge and Arup. I think lastly, the addition of Astm C496 is specifically called out. That is a splitting tensile strength test for the segmental lining concrete. Splitting tensile strength has already been a requirement in the specification. The additional language of Astm C496 makes it clear that this industry standard method should be the one used for that. So with that, again, I'll just summarize that in my review of these are all fairly minor editorial, but the ones I did mention are all increasing, frankly, the requirements of the contractor and making more stringent or adding value to the existing quality requirements of the project. With that, I'll take questions.
Mike, I'm sorry, specification section 315600. I didn't hear your explanation of that one.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I skipped that one over. That's more of an editorial correction. So in this case, in the existing spec, there are lean concrete requirements for a diaphragm wall. This is a wall used on the North Shore, a slurry wall sometimes it's called. On the North Shore, the shaft will be constructed with the diaphragm wall, and in fact on the South Shore. So there are trial panel tests that are performed on that concrete, and there's lean concrete material required for that. So the existing spec referenced a different spec section when in fact the lean concrete requirements are in that exact 315600. So the reference to another other specification was incorrect, and so it's just been deleted, removed. That's the requested edit, is to remove reference to a different specification because the requirements for that lean concrete are within 315600.
Yes, thank you. Do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay.
I have no questions.
All right. So, Ray, would this be an appropriate area where we, as the authority, approve these changes?
Yes, the way the precedent so far has been. Yes, Chairman. The way that the board has, the precedent that's set is the board did have the authority to approve the jointly developed project specifications, and they did so in February of '21. Since then, all changes to the jointly developed project specifications have been approved by this board, and so, yes, a motion would be appropriate for approval.
Okay, then I submit a motion that we accept these project changes.
Support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Up next on our agenda, contractor selection status update. Ryan Mitchell with MDOT and Dr. Mooney.
Yep. Good morning, Chairman, Member England. So just a brief update on the status of the contractor selection process. In March of '22, Enbridge issued an RFP, as you know, to select the construction contractor to build the tunnel. Since then, interested proponents have participated in technical review meetings, including site visits, and site visits and technical review meetings have been completed with all proponents. Commercial discussions have been conducted with all proponents to review the contract and for solicitation of their feedback on the contract. And proposals from contractors in response to the RFP are anticipated later in 2022, with contractor selection to follow that.
How many contractors have shown interest at this point?
I think the answer is 5, but I would actually defer that to Enbridge to clarify that. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members. Peter Holren, Government Relations for Enbridge. We originally had 5 consortiums that expressed interest. There are now 3 active consortiums that are bidding on putting proposals together under the specs of the RFP.
Thank you, Peter. You have any other questions on that?
I do not.
Mike, do you have anything to add, Dr. Mooney?
I would just add, Chairman Nystrom, that I've had the opportunity to observe the process as per the tunnel agreement, and so that's I've been participating to observe that process with meetings with the proponents and the site visits to the project, which I think were all very, very, very useful for the project moving forward.
Thank you. All right. Moving forward in our agenda, final construction execution plan, material change approval process. Ray Howd with the Attorney General's office.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is more of a heads up of future considerations. Once Enbridge does select its tunnel contractor, it will begin drafting a tunnel construction execution plan, or CEP as it's known. First of all, I did provide a memo to the authority members. It is attorney-client privileged. I don't see any reason why it couldn't be released to the public, but that privilege is held by the authority board and can only be waived by the authority board. Is there a motion?
Yes, there's a motion to waive that privacy.
Yep. Support. Support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the under section 7.7 of the tunnel agreement, There's a process that's outlined for this tunnel construction execution plan. And Enbridge and its contractors would develop a draft construction execution plan that will list the key activities required for the construction of the tunnel, including schedule and milestones associated with the execution of those key activities. The draft CEP, the authority has the opportunity to make suggested recommended changes to the draft. And then once those suggested recommendations are made, then Enbridge and its contractors will finalize and develop the final tunnel CEP. One of the action items and the purpose of the memo is for the authority board to be thinking about who or what consultants it would like to review or come up with proposed suggested changes. One of the options might be to designate one or more of the representatives that were involved in the jointly developed project specifications team. Those individuals were the authority's tunnel expert, Michael Mooney, PhD, its pipeline construction expert, Daniel Cooper, Ryan Mitchell, the manager of MDOT Innovative Contracting, Matt Chinowith, MDOT Chief Bridge Engineer, Ihab Darwish, he was a senior project manager at Alfred Benesh and Company, and Mahmoud Khwaja, Tunnel's National Discipline Leader at CDM Smith. And eventually, as assuming this project moves forward, the authority will be contracting with an independent quality assurance contractor. That person could be part of the team as well. The point, though, is to be thinking about how the authority wants to stay informed and whether or not to approve any suggested recommendations to the draft CEP. And decide the process for approving recommended changes to the draft.
Is there a reason to approve these names now?
No, this is to begin discussion, to be thinking about these, although certainly any input that the board could give would assist in next steps for the staff and representatives and consultants.
So I guess my thought would be that we would support all of them to participate as needed. I mean, it's working well right now, having this wealth of knowledge of all of these experts.
Yes.
And if all of them aren't needed, if there's a time when one or a couple of them aren't needed on a change that is being discussed, that's fine. But to have that team using their expertise to guide us, I think the process is working well where they are involved, the review is happening in a timely basis, and then just as Mike just did on these specification changes, these are brought to the board at our meetings and reported on by the staff, and then we give approval if they are supportive of what's happening.
Yeah, could I ask Mike a question about
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
Mike, I think you know that there's been sort of suggestions or proposals from a geophysicist to use acoustic techniques to look ahead of the drilling, to be in a better position to anticipate what's going to be drilled soon, in the next 100 feet or so. Is this really worth doing, or maybe a better way to ask this is it possible for you to look into this to see if it's worth doing?
Member England, we can certainly look into it. I happen to have some experience in this area, having done research on both acoustic methods and electrical methods to image ahead of tunnel boring machines for this very reason. It's challenging, no doubt.
Yes.
It's challenging to do something like that in the Straits when you have a large body of water if you're trying to access or have an acoustic array in the water, for example. So without diving into the detailed technical challenges, I would just say it's certainly, if it can be done, it is certainly of value.
I see.
The technical challenges are significant to implement that. There are commercial techniques available for this, and there are research-based techniques that have been applied on projects. So it's not completely out of the realm. It's not one of those things that has not been thought about.
Yeah.
It has been thought about quite a bit. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and if it's all right with you, I will just pass on whatever information has come to me about this, and without any recommendation on my part on whether this is right or wrong. It's just, I think you should be aware of this proposal.
So I like the idea of keeping the team directly involved as Enbridge ultimately chooses their contractor consortium, and ultimately I'd like to see our quality assurance contractor that we end up hiring being part of that conversation. So if you're in agreement, Tony, then I think a motion now to approve that team so that they're in place, and then the process will be that that team brings any recommended changes back to us for concurrence.
No, I think we've established a good team, and I move that we proceed with it.
I support, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that's the route we'll go then.
Member Nystrom, there are
Yes.
a couple other issues.
Yes.
Because that motion would, I assume, would also apply. The next step after the draft tunnel construction execution plan is that Enbridge and its contractors will develop a final CEP. There is no authority, or there's no provision in the tunnel agreement for the authority to approve that final tunnel agreement. And once completed, Enbridge will construct the tunnel in accordance with the final CEP. Then you get to the last section of 7.7, which if Enbridge proposed to make any material changes to the final tunnel CEP, then it will provide the authority written notice of the proposed change to the designated representative of the authority. Again, this process of evaluating a proposed material change, it sounds like a good idea if it were done by committee with this group of experts.
Yeah.
Possibly a process could be developed that maybe one person speaks for the committee, just to, again, to tighten up the process to bring it to the authority. The thing about material change is it's a little squishy as far as the definition. It's defined in the tunnel agreement as any substantive departure from the project specifications provided for in section 2 above. So a couple of points about this. One is, my reading of the tunnel agreement is that, as you've done earlier, you're approving various changes to the jointly developed project specification as we go. However, once the final CEP has been completed, then all approved project specifications are essentially merged into the final CEP. And only if Enbridge proposes a material change, which would mean any substantive departure from the project specs, would the authority then be required to take action. What happens is Enbridge submits the proposed changes to the authority's representative, and then Enbridge at that point will not implement any of those proposed changes unless one of two things occurs. The authority concurs with the proposed changes in writing, or two, the authority fails to respond to Enbridge's notice of proposed changes within 30 calendar days. That's a pretty aggressive time frame, and it's very possible that when these requests, these notices for proposed material changes are made, that the authority will need to call special meetings specifically for addressing and evaluating and approving or concurring or denying any proposed material change. The last thing is that, again, the authority would need to develop a designated representative to receive that notice, develop a process for evaluating the proposed material changes, be prepared to call special meetings to comply with deadlines. And the staff has been working with Enbridge staff. There's been some discussions about possibly developing a memorandum of understanding that might better define these terms and to try to define a process that would be the least burdensome to the authority board, such as presenting maybe once a month changes or allowing for sufficient time. I think the main thing to avoid would be to have multiple notices of material change requests trickling in throughout a month, and having it just could create an administrative nightmare to meet the deadlines for action. So the motion that you made could also be extended to the group that would evaluate any proposed material changes, and also in developing a process of internal process for the submission of the notices and approval.
Let me ask, Dr. Mooney, question for you. In previous projects, is this a process that creates, ultimately you see a large amount of changes that happen throughout the project?
Well, Chairman Nicer, I don't know if it's a large amount, but there are inevitably changes that have to be made because things happen during construction where either a requirement is difficult to meet or material products unavailable that's specified, and you just have to tackle those as you go. So there's oftentimes requests for revisions to the specs that come up during construction, and you have to have a process in place to meet those.
Thank you. So, Tony, maybe the process would be that we designate. Right now, we have monthly reports that come in from Enbridge. We see those. Those come into Ryan. He shares those with us. Maybe we work with Enbridge to develop a memorandum of understanding that says that our expert team will be involved as they see fit. Those monthly reports will come in to Ryan, will be shared with us, and if there are changes that we feel we need to discuss, we will ask for a meeting. If they are changes that are like what we went through with Mike, that are not necessarily deep detail, but those things that maybe just minor changes, we can address those. But I understand the challenge. Would the challenge then be, Ryan, that really it's a public notice on a meeting on a monthly basis, and we have to get it out to the public, we have to have a meeting, and so that's probably the biggest burden, but we have a responsibility as well, so we will just have to deal with it. But I think that we can put a process in place through this motion that keeps our experts involved, keeps us notified, and we still have we still fulfill our responsibility of discussing these and approving them.
Yes, you might want to just pre-schedule all the meetings and then cancel if you don't need them.
So, if I could, Chairman and Member England, I agree that that's exactly what we're attempting to do. The proposed process is simply to ensure that the team that jointly developed the specifications, which you moved to advance into construction, which I think is kind of exactly what we were proposing. we'll continue to work with Enbridge as issues, and again, in construction inevitably arise, to ensure that the same team that developed the specification, to ensure that it met the requirements of not only tunnel industry best practice, but also Michigan specifications. We want that team to stay and to continue to evaluate these changes so that none of these changes elapse before the authority can review and approve. So that's the point. It's not a bad idea, Tony, to potentially schedule those meetings on a monthly basis, and then, as you suggested, cancel if there's no business.
Yes. No, just because the declaring when you have these public meetings would, lose 2 weeks? So if we didn't do it that way, it'd be very hard to meet the schedule.
Yeah. I think it's an excellent idea. So do you want to add that to your motion then?
I'd like to add that to my motion.
I support.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And I apologize, does that motion encompass the ability of staff to work with Enbridge to develop an MOU?
A memo, oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on then, the core permit application. Ryan?
Sure, just a brief update on that, Chairman Nystrom. So the U.S. Army Corps has selected a third-party contractor, and they did this shortly after our last board meeting in February. The EIS process is continuing to move forward, and the issuance of the Corps' notice of intent to prepare an EIS is anticipated this summer. So they're noticing it. Sorry, that's a bad verb, Tony.
Your word of noticing.
But they're going to issue their notice of intent this summer. Enbridge continues to advance the EIS in cooperation with the Army Corps by responding to their data requests, and they're moving forward with survey work to support the permit review process.
All right. Great. Thank you, Ryan. All right. Status of the PSC proceedings. Ray?
Yes, when we were here at the last meeting, I indicated that on behalf of the authority that I would be filing an initial brief. That brief was filed on February 18th, 2022, essentially relying on the testimony of Dr. Mooney and Daniel Cooper, our pipeline expert, and they believe that based on all of the jointly developed project specification and their knowledge that the tunnel was in the public interest and that it could be built to meet or exceed standard specifications in the industry. The authority did not file a reply brief, but the rest of the parties did file a reply brief on March 11th of 2022, and we are now waiting for the PSC, the commission itself, to render a decision. I have no idea when that may be.
Sure.
It could be any time. It could be, I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where we stand on that. I did want to bring up that if you recall, the Eagle had issued Enbridge a permit, and Bay Mills had filed an appeal of that issuance. The permit was issued February 25th of 2021, and there was 60 days to file an appeal. By April 26th, Bay Mills, from their Chicago office, filed their brief. It arrived at the the hearing office at 5:36 in the p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The rules required that any appeal that was filed after 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time was to be considered filed the following day. That's how Eagle treated that appeal, and the ALJ then dismissed Bay Mills' appeal on February 18th of 2022. And so now there is, Bay Mills is appealing that decision and arguing that since Michigan was on daylight savings time, it was only 4:36 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and the brief was timely, But that appeal is ongoing and waiting for a decision as to whether or not their appeal was timely.
All right. So we did have quite a discussion at our last meeting, Ryan and Ray, about, oh, go ahead.
I just want to ask a question on what, the appeal, what, can we talk about the content of the appeal? What was, I mean, even if it's late, if there's something that we should be discussing?
We are not, the MSCA is not involved in that appeal. That is between Enbridge and Bay Mills.
That's right.
And Eagle.
Yep.
But Eagle's taken no position on that appeal.
Got it.
My question was somewhat similar but different. We approved a consultation process with the tribes. Has there been any interaction since our last meeting?
Outreach, interaction, no. Outreach, yes. Interaction, no.
Okay. All right. I should have done it at the beginning of the meeting, but I'd also like to welcome Dan Cooper, our pipeline expert. He's on the call with us as well. And welcome, Dan. I apologize for not recognizing you at the beginning of the meeting.
No problem. Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. With that, we are now in the public comment section. As I had mentioned, we did have some submissions that were sent in, and those are part of the public record and will be put on our website. Do we have folks that want to come up and give to folks? Okay. All right. Welcome. Microphone.
There we go. That's better. Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you today. My name is Cam Cabot. I'm the Sheboygan County Drain Commissioner. I'm a local realtor or real estate agent, and I'm also running for state representative for the 106th district. However, I'm not here today wearing any title or pin, but as a local Michigander who raised his kids along the Straits. I wanted to take a minute and thank the Tunnel Authority for the work to make the Great Lakes Tunnel Project a success. Investing in energy infrastructure is key to ensuring already rising energy prices across the state do not unexpectedly skyrocket further due to a shutdown. With renewed focus nationally on energy infrastructure, I'm grateful for the work being done by the Tunnel Authority to ensure our waters are safe and our pipelines are secure. We know the tunnel is a no-brainer. I'm grateful for the work being done to move this project forward. Thank you very much.
And next is Sean from Oil and Water Don't Mix.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sean McBrady, and I am the campaign coordinator for Oil and Water Don't Mix. And again today, I just wanted to raise a couple things that the Straits Corridor Authority has not yet considered to the tunnel project. And with your role as oversight on behalf of the people of Michigan, they're really things that need to be considered. One of them being the comments raised by Brian O'Mara, a hydrogeologist with years of experience tunneling in the Great Lakes region and leading tunneling projects, who raised in comment over 70 distinct issues with the tunnel plans as they currently stand that have not yet been addressed. And those are definitely something the Corridor Authority should be looking into, including the lack of geotechnical research that has been done to date, which leaves huge possibilities for problems while tunneling. Another thing that hasn't been considered is more of a risk of liability to the state of Michigan. It's the fact that Enbridge has signed a 99-year lease to occupy the tunnel. There was a lease agreement as part of the tunnel agreement back in 2018. However, to the federal regulator, FERC, Enbridge last year asked for the Lakehead pipeline system to be depreciated over a 20-year period. So going from 2021, when their depreciation request was filed, we're looking at 2041, the Lakehead system being entirely depreciated. With the likely 2 to 3 year time frame for Army Corps to review, to finish the environmental impact statement and potentially issue permits, we're talking at least 2 or 3 years before construction begins. It'd be charitable to say this thing could be operational by 2029 or 2030. And 11 years down the road, if Enbridge decides to abandon the tunnel, which there are signs because of their filings with FERC that that's a possibility, the state of Michigan is left with a stranded asset that the state is going to be liable for years into the future. So those things, especially with the fact that we have 2 or 3 years before construction would potentially start, that's something that the Tunnel Authority should really be looking into to make sure that the state of Michigan is not going to be liable for such a major infrastructure project after Enbridge abandons it shortly after building it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anna McGlashan. I'm not here representing any institution. I was just listening and had a quick question. I understand you're not obligated to answer it. So my question is regarding the substantive changes and the process for making sure that goes to a meeting. So is it what you decided that if Enbridge decides it is a substantive change that requires notification, that there will be a meeting? Or is there, I heard that it's gonna go to Ryan, which I believe is you. Are you Ryan? Okay, sorry, first time here. So is it the process that you would decide if it is substantive enough to generate a meeting, or is it something where an engineer would look at that and decide that that is substantive or not?
So you are correct on your first question that this is not a Q&A session. I think that we'd be happy to clarify for everyone your confusion on what we approved. My understanding is well, I'll let Ray, our AG representative, clarify what our process will be, just so that everyone walks out of here clear as to what we passed.
One of the thank you. What part of the motion is to work with Enbridge to develop a memorandum of understanding. That memorandum of understanding would more fully define what a material change is, and once whether it is or isn't, there could be some disagreement. Hopefully the memorandum of understanding would resolve that and develop a process for implementing changes. But it's the goal of the memorandum of understanding to describe what the process will be, what the definitions are, and what happens. And all material changes would come before the board to consider one way or the other, to concur with, to disapprove, or otherwise.
Okay, so memo of understanding to indicate if Enbridge, under those rules, decides it's a material change, then it goes to the board, and the board may then decide if they want to have a meeting. It's not if material change, then shall have meeting, but the board can decide yes, no, from there.
No, if there is a notice of proposed change, my understanding would be it will come before the board, but it may be through a special meeting, because the board typically meets quarterly.
Mm-hmm.
And
you have the 30 days.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
All right, that's it. Any other questions, Tony?
No.
Comments?
No.
All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.